and Chike, a graduate of Hampton University, a BS there, a master's from Clark Atlanta University, and a PhD, a doctor of philosophy from Georgia State. Our brother, all the way from Atlanta, Dr. Chike Akua.
Thank you so much, Brother Joe. I always like to begin with what time it is, and there was a great African-American leader, teacher, and preacher by the name of Dr. Benjamin E. Mays, who said it's 11:59 on the clock of destiny. And life is like a minute, only 60 seconds in it. Forced upon you, can't refuse it. Didn't seek it, didn't choose it. But it's up to you to use it. You'll suffer if you lose it. Give account if you abuse it. It's only a minute, but eternity is in it. And with that minute, you, me, and we can change and transform the world. Now, I am very excited to be here with you all today, and I want to give a very special thanks to Pastor Brennan and this men's ministry, and most especially to my good brother Joe Harrison, whom I met, man, I guess that was about 15 years ago when we went on our trip to Egypt. And so I'm very thankful to be here with you all to share this message. I want to bring you greetings from Clark Atlanta University, one of our great HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities. I'm a graduate of two, as Brother Joe mentioned. I did my undergraduate work at Hampton University, my master's degree at Clark Atlanta University, my doctorate at Georgia State, but now I've been blessed and fortunate to come back to Clark Atlanta University and be on the faculty in the Department of Educational Leadership. And it's important that we understand the power of HBCUs because I often tell my students, and they bear witness to this, that at predominantly white institutions, the intelligence of Black students is oftentimes called into question. But at HBCUs, the intelligence of Black students is called into action. One more time, at PWIs, predominantly white institutions, the intelligence of Black students is oftentimes called into question, but at HBCUs, it's called into action. And I'm sure it's called into action also at Canaan Baptist Church. I want to begin by giving honor to the Most High, who is known by many names and worshiped in many ways, certainly the one source and the one force through which we all live, move, and have our being. And I'm very excited to be here with you all to share this message. In African tradition, it is very important that we honor our ancestors because there's an African proverb that says, if we stand tall, it is because we stand on the shoulders of our ancestors. Or as Dr. Jacob Carruthers has said, indeed, our stride is wide because we're walking in the footsteps of giants. When you hear us speak of the ancestors, please don't be alarmed or disturbed by that because the Bible refers to our ancestors who walked the righteous path as that great cloud of witnesses. In addition, in the Old Testament, whenever the Most High introduces itself to the prophets or the people, the Most High introduces itself as, I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And were Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They were the ancestors to the people that were being spoken to. So it's very, very important that we honor, uplift, elevate, and celebrate our ancestors, especially when there have been specific attempts to erase that legacy. As you can see, this is a very visually driven presentation, and my pictures are very important. You've heard it said before that a picture is worth 1,000 words. And if a picture is worth 1,000 words, then you're about to read a book of over 100,000 pages because the pictures and images that I have to share with you are going to literally blow your mind, okay? And so I'm reminded of the great words of the poet Lister Bell Middleton, who says, sharpen your eye and tune your ear so you know what you see and understand what you hear. Now, if you haven't done so already, please mute yourself, and maybe at the end we'll have time for questions and answers, but we want to make sure that everyone can hear what we're going to be talking about today. And of course, our topic is, what does it mean to be Black? What does it mean to be Black? Brothers, and I believe we have some sisters on the line as well, brothers and sisters, I believe that we're in need of a radical redefinition of what it means to be Black because we have seen the gangsterization and criminalization of Black males through skillful media manipulation. We've seen the objectification and hypersexualization of Black females. By objectification, I mean that our sisters are seen or portrayed as objects of sexual pleasure rather than subjects worthy of dignity and respect. When I say hypersexualization, I'm referring to the fact that once again they're portrayed as hypersexual. And so we need a radical redefinition of what it means to be Black. And one of the best ways to do that is to go back in time and see what the Most High had to say, what our ancestors had to say about this, and how they lived their lives. Okay, so we're going to be talking about going from history to destiny, from history to destiny. I'm going to be sharing some information from my book, Honoring Our Ancestral Obligations, which will tell you how you can get that a little bit later on. Also, one of my books that may be of interest to you is Parent Power. And then we also have a book called The African Origins of Our Faith. All right. All right. Now, as I mentioned, I'm going to be sharing some really interesting pictures. So feel free to take some screenshots and to share those on social media. And that way we can get this out to a broader audience. All right. One of the key scriptures that has impacted and influenced my life for many years, from the time when I first became serious about my faith, and it's very, I'm sure it's very familiar to you in 2 Timothy 2, chapter 2, verse 15, and that is, study to show thyself approved unto God, a workman that needeth not be ashamed, and knows how to rightly divide the word. So when we talk about studying to show ourselves approved, you must understand that there have been intensive efforts to make sure that not only we couldn't study, but that we couldn't read. In other words, education was intentionally kept from us. And so I'm going to peel back the curtains of the hands of time of critical information that's been kept from us. All right. There was a time when Black people led the world in scientific innovation, literary production, and wealth creation. One more time, there was a time when Black people led the world in scientific innovation, literary production, and wealth creation. This time has been very skillfully almost erased from the history books. Certainly, it doesn't show up in the way that it should in the textbooks that our children study from in public schools. And then, some of us think, well, man, the public school is good. I'm gonna send my child to a private school. Guess what? It oftentimes doesn't show up there either. So then we say, oh man, I'm gonna go the extra mile. I'm gonna send my child to a Christian school. Guess what? It doesn't show up there either. Okay. And so this is why it's so important for us to be very, very clear about our history and culture so that our children are getting it at home, and we must continue to agitate to get it in the schools as well. One of the original names of Africa was Alkebulan. And Alkebulan means land of the spirit people. Why? Because we brought spirit to everything that we did. We brought spirit to reading and writing and language and literature. We brought spirit to architecture and engineering. We brought spirit to agriculture and astronomy. We brought spirit to mathematics and medicine. We brought spirit to science and technology. But now we live in a society that attempts to despiritualize us in everything that we do. All life on planet Earth began in Africa, where the big red arrow is, near Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania. Okay, and it's very important that we understand the original names of these places, because the original names oftentimes tell the whole story. And so life began in Central Africa along the banks of the Nile River and spread up the Nile River Valley. Okay, and great empires began to spring up in these areas. So what we today call Sudan in ancient times was called Nubia. What we today call Ethiopia was called Kush. Of course, now people refer to Kush as weed, but that's a whole different topic. And when I'm speaking to young people, they always fall out laughing when I say Kush, because they're referring to weed. And I didn't always know that, but I have to let them know, did you know that all the chemicals that you need to get high are already in your body? You don't have to smoke anything. You don't have to drink any alcohol. All the scripture says we are fearfully and wonderfully made. All of the chemicals that you need to get high are already in your body. We have just been so miseducated, we haven't been taught how to release those chemicals. Otherwise, we could be high all the time. Look, I'm high right now, y'all. but I promise you, I haven't been smoking, and the only thing that I've been drinking is a cup of tea and some water. Okay, and so it's very, very important that we understand and get back to our original systems of education. Okay, so all life on planet Earth began, and please mute yourself if you're not already muted so that everybody can hear. All life on planet Earth began deep in Central Africa. And that's so important because, and we can talk a little bit later, maybe during the question and answer session, how you can even go into Genesis and it bears witness to that. It mentions that the Garden of Eden was near the Pishon and the Gihon River. Well, you may not know reading that the Pishon is the White Nile and the Gihon is the Blue Nile. And it says it's near the land of Cush or Ethiopia. So even the way that we read the scriptures, we have been miseducated away from our motherland. But I want you to know that all of these great empires that sprang up along the Nile River Valley, this was the world's first cultural superhighway. And Kemet, or what we today call Egypt, became the repository of the knowledge, scientific and spiritual knowledge of all of the great empires. So we have the most artifacts would then be in Kemet, okay? And so we're going to take a close look at Kemet for just a moment. And here we see the name of the nation written in the original language. Now, when we see this kind of writing, typically we refer to it, most people would refer to it as hieroglyphics. However, hieroglyphics is a Greek term, and this is not Greek writing. The original term is Medu Neter. Medu Neter, and check this out, this is going to blow your mind right now. Medu Neter translates to mean word of God. Word of God. And of course, when we think word of God, we think of the Bible, not knowing that our ancestors wrote that as well. But we'll get to that later, maybe if we have time. But this is the original name of the nation of Kemet, written in the original language of Medu Neter. And I want to break down each of these glyphs to show you the charred or burnt piece of wood represents the K and the M sound. They didn't use vowels, A, E, I, O, and U, the way that we do today. Later scholars would add vowels for ease of pronunciation, but they didn't use vowels the way that we do in the English language. All right, so you have the K and the M sound represented by a burnt piece of wood. You have the owl representing also the M sound. You have a bread loaf representing the T sound. Now, brothers and sisters, this by itself means black, okay? But in Medu Neter writing, you have what's called a determinative. And the determinative determines what the rest of the word is referring to. So as I said, this by itself means black, but X with a circle around it means nation. So what does this mean together? It means black nation. And I promise you, you won't see this on the History Channel. I promise you won't see this in National Geographic. And there's a reason for that, okay? And I know I'm going very fast because I have a lot to cover, but I want to show you who these people were. And then I want to show you what they did, because if I just showed you what they did, you'd be going by the European whitenized images that we oftentimes see in cartoons and movies as they have whitewashed ancient Kemet. So I'm going to show you who these people were and what they look like. Then I'm going to show you what they did. So in order to do that, I had to take some statues from ancient Kemet, and I had to put them, those pictures alongside of current African Americans whose names and faces you would recognize to approximate their appearance, So for example, when I look at this king right here, King Mentuhotep, and I look at his nose and I look at his lips, I said, now this brother looks a little bit like LeBron James. Okay. And then when I see, for example, when I see King Khafre, and I take a look at his profile, I say, man, I've seen this face before too. He looks a little bit like Kobe Bryant, one of the giants that we lost in 2020. Now, again, I'm just trying to approximate the appearance. So, for example, when I look at King Amenhotep III, take a look at the nose, the lips, the high cheekbones, the eyes. I said, man, that looks just like Brother Adrian Peterson, who plays in the NFL. Okay, so I'm just trying to approximate the appearance here so that, for example, when I look at Queen T, now I don't know if you've seen this statue before, but you have seen this face many, many times before, whether you realize it or not. You've seen that face many, many times before. You just may not have known that when you were looking at this face of Queen T, that you were also looking at the face of former First Lady Michelle Obama. This is why when I look at our brothers and sisters, I see kings and queens. And wouldn't it be wonderful to see that face in the White House again? But we're on a good trajectory to bring some type of semblance of sanity back to the White House, hopefully very soon. All right, now look at this brother right here. This is King Amenemhet. Now this brother got the long locks. Take a look at the wide nose, the thick lips, the beard, even though it's been chiseled off. And interestingly, when I saw this, I said, man, this looks just like a brother who used to play for the Atlanta Falcons, a defensive back named Dante Robinson. Can you see the similarities here? All right. And then when I saw this picture, I said, man, this brother right here, Senmosret II, looked just like the actor Mahershala Ali. Again, I'm just trying to approximate the appearance. I'm going to show you who these people were. Then I'm going to show you what they did. All right. But not only that, if you take a look at this picture right here, this is King Huni. Now we got to go back to the golden age of hip hop for you to understand who that looks like, looking just like KRS-One, whose name meant knowledge reigns supreme over nearly everything. He was not only one of the founding voices of hip hop, but certainly one of the ones who was doing conscious hip hop back in the day. Take a look at Queen Amenertis in comparison to Lupita Nyong'o. All right. Take a look at Narmer. Take a look at the nose, the high cheekbones, the lips, the eyes. I said, man, that brother looked just like Kirk Franklin. And so now that we have a sense of who these people were and what they look like, now we can look at what they did. So for example, Imhotep was the world's first recorded physician in human history. He was not only a doctor, he was the architect of the step pyramid. He was a mathematician. He was an advisor to the king, what we call a multidisciplinary genius, priest and a poet, and just did a number of amazing things. Okay. And so oftentimes our children don't see that in their science books, that he was the first recorded doctor in history, or study from his writings as others have. Okay. Now you saw this picture of the pyramids. The original name of pyramid, because pyramid is again a Greek term. The original term is mir. And mir means place of ascension. Place of ascension. A place where you would come to study the sacred sciences, where your knowledge and your consciousness would ascend to a higher level. So these weren't just tombs, as we've oftentimes been told. These were astronomical observatories where we would calculate the precession and movement of the stars. And if you're wondering the significance of this, be mindful that one of the signs and signals that the Christ child was about to be born was that a star was spotted in the east. Well, how could a star be spotted unless our ancestors were astronomers? As a matter of fact, some translations of the biblical scriptures also translate what has been translated the Magi or the wise men. I'm told actually a better translation would be astronomers or astrologers, because those were the ones who were looking in the skies and charting the movement of the stars, looking for signs and symbols. Okay, so as we go a little bit further, there were passageways throughout all of these pyramids where we studied the sacred sciences and charted the star systems. We've been blessed and fortunate to go to Kemet or Egypt 6 times, and I look forward to going again once COVID-19 has ended. This is a picture of me with a few students that we had taken that particular year. Okay. Now, this is a picture of me standing in front of the Great Pyramid. The Great Pyramid has over 2.5 million stones, each stone weighing an average of 2.5 tons. And several stones weigh as much as 70 tons. 481 feet high, covering an area of 13 acres. 201 stair steps to the top, but not like the stair steps at your house, your apartment, your townhouse. The steps come up to my shoulder. Okay. Now, with all of our so-called modern technology, we don't have any cranes that can move stones that large. Much less when we found out that the granite stones were taken from a quarry 500 miles to the south in Aswan. How did these ancient Africans get those stones up the Nile River and over to the Giza Plateau and then stack them side by side so perfectly? And were able to preserve it in such a way that the Great Pyramid is the only one of the 7 wonders of the world that is still standing, the only one. Now, one of the things that happens when you talk about the pyramids is that we've all been told a big lie, and oftentimes you've heard it said, oh, the pyramids were such a mathematical and engineering marvel that they must have been, they couldn't have been built by human hands, certainly not by black hands. They must have been built by, that's right, aliens, right? We've all probably heard that lie, right? And the reason that we know that that's a lie is because all we have to do is go into the Alms Mathematics Papyrus. The Alms Mathematics Papyrus is the oldest mathematics textbook in the world. It's over 3,900 years old and known to be a copy of an older text. Well, how do you know? The reason that we know is because the writer Amos says this is a copy of an old African text. But the knowledge of how to read those has been kept from us intentionally, but we're going back and we're recovering and rescuing and reconstructing that history. But problem number 56 on the Alms Mathematics Papyrus shows ancient Africans calculating the slope of a pyramid and other things. That's just problem 56. There are a number of other things. In addition to that, we know the mistakes that our ancestors made. So we started off with Imhotep's step pyramid. Then Seneferu comes along and says, I want to build a true pyramid without the steps in it. And so he attempts to build a pyramid without such large steps, but he makes a mistake in the measurement of his angles. And as you can see, that's why they call this one the bent pyramid. So he had to go back into his laboratory, recalculate his angles, and he was finally able to construct what we call a true pyramid. But then his son, Khufu, comes along and builds the Great Pyramid. And his son, Khafre, comes along and builds the second largest pyramid. Khafre is the brother that looked like Kobe Bryant. And then his son, Menkaure, comes along and builds the third largest pyramid. So what we see here, brothers and sisters, is African progressive perfection. Each generation improving upon the last. One more time, African progressive perfection. Each generation improving upon the last. And yet researchers tell us that this may be the first generation of African Americans who will not exceed the accomplishments of their parents. I want you to think about that for a moment. Every generation of African people in America have always continued the legacy by succeeding beyond in ways that their parents had not. But researchers are saying this may be the first generation of African American children who will not exceed the accomplishments of their children. That means there's something we are not doing correctly, in addition to the fact that the resistance to our rise has increased as well. Okay, so just be mindful of these things. Now we've gone from Kemet or Egypt in Africa. Now we're here in America. Everybody's seen the Lincoln Memorial before, but many people may not be aware that when they were looking at it, they were looking at an exact replica of Ramesu. The Greeks call them Ramesses. And our brother Tony Browder has done an amazing job of sharing with us uh, the connection between the architecture in America and ancient African architecture. Okay. And so what's so important is that we not only recognize and realize that what today is the Lincoln Memorial, it was copied from Ramessa. Now you can say, oh, Dr. Akua, that's just a coincidence, but stay with me for a minute because I'm gonna make it very, very clear. Okay. Because if I were to take you to the temple of Abu Simbel, you would see not one, but you would see four colossal statues of Ramesu. One, two, this one was destroyed by an earthquake. Otherwise, we always built for eternity. As long as Europeans didn't tamper with it, we built for eternity and it's still standing. So you got one, two, three, four colossal statues of Ramesu. And look at how massive this is in, in, uh, in comparison to the people standing here. But when you go in between these statues, there's a doorway to a temple. And something amazing happens inside of this temple only 2 times a year. The sun shines a beam of light down this corridor and lights up the face of the king only 2 times a year, on his birthday and the day of his coronation. Now I ask you, what kind of architectural, engineering, mathematical expertise did these ancient Africans have to have in order to orient a temple so that the sun would shine a beam of light down this corridor to light up the face of the king only 2 days during the year? We're talking about an amazing people. But in addition to that, we can go a little bit further, and what we see is that this temple is so unique. It was not built from the ground up, it was carved out of the side of a mountain. And so what you thought were just statues, yes, they are statues, but they're pillars holding up the entire structure. So they dug into the mountain, chipped away all of the excess stone to reveal this beautiful sculpture. Then they carved and painted the writings of the Medu Neter from floor to ceiling, and even on the ceiling, carved from the side of a mountain. But now wait a minute. Where have I seen four faces carved in the side of a mountain before? Where have I seen four faces carved in the side of a mountain before? As Ashra Kwesi says, somebody knows something about you that you don't know about yourself. And the founding fathers of America studied African history very, very carefully because they wanted to reproduce or recreate a nation as great as ancient Kemet, but they wanted to do it in America, and they knew they couldn't do it without you. They knew they couldn't do it without us. They knew they couldn't do it without our knowledge, without our wisdom, without our expertise. And this is one of the challenges that our children, most of them, know nothing about. And the reason that most of the children don't know is because most of the adults don't know. But we've got to change all that. Here we see the Washington Monument, tallest structure in Washington, D.C. at 555 feet tall. Let's make a hypothesis, which is an educated guess. Where do you think the design came from? Well, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure it out now. You guessed it, it comes from Kemet. And we call it a tekken. The tekken was used as a sundial. And you could tell the time of day by the way that the sun cast a shadow off the tekken. I took this picture of the sun rising behind Hatshepsut's tekken so that you could get a sense of how it was used and what it looked like. But wait a minute, now here we see the Washington Monument in front of a reflecting pool. Now, why would they take an ancient African symbol of resurrection and strength and name it after a white man who owned Africans as slaves? That's something to think about for a moment. But here we see the Washington Monument in front of a reflecting pool. Imagine my amazement when I get to the Temple of Amun-Ra, and what do I see? But there's your tekken and there's your reflecting pool. Again, somebody knows something about you that you don't know about yourself. Now, what I'd like for you to do is to type in the chat box. If you're learning something this morning and you're glad that you're here, I want you to just type yes in the chat box. Just type yes in the chat box. Now, while you're doing that, you're also going to need to get a screenshot of what I have up here, because I have a free online course for you, a free online 6-part course. Okay. And you can retrieve it at intro to africanorigins.com. Again, you can retrieve it at intro to africanorigins.com. Let me change that one thing. It should be free intro to africanorigins.com. Make sure you make that clear. I'm going to type it in the chat box here. It should be free intro to africanorigins.com. Free intro to africanorigins.com. And feel free to share that with whoever you like. Just let's circulate it as much as possible, because it's 6 free videos that will introduce you in depth, more in depth to this knowledge. All right. And thank you for all those yeses, for those of you who said you're learning something this morning. Okay. Wonderful. All right. Now, here's the other thing that I would like for you to do. If there's somebody that you know that could benefit from this information, but may not be here this morning. If you know somebody who should be here that's not here, put yes. Well, put check, CHECK, and that will let us know, because we want to, again, make this recording available to a number of people after this. Okay. All right. So give me just a second as I fire up my PowerPoint once again, and we're going to go to the next level. I appreciate you all's participation and hanging here with me. The best is yet to come. So, some people, who have a little bit of knowledge about these historical matters, they would say, well, all this is real good, Dr. Akua, but weren't African Americans captured from West Africa? So why are you telling us so much about East Africa and ancient Kemet if current day African Americans were captured from West Africa and enslaved? That's a great question. So let's look at it. When the Nile Valley was inundated by invaders, it was inundated by the Persians, the Greeks, the Romans, and Arabs. And when it was inundated in that fashion, there were 6 mass migrations from East Africa to West Africa, from the Nile to the Niger River. Okay. And when they left East Africa and the Nile Valley, they took their culture with them. They took their knowledge and their expertise and experience with them. And they built the great empires of Ghana, Mali, and Songhai. Dr. Edward Robinson, one of our great scholars, tells us about this in the book, The Journey of the Songhai People. Dr. Hasimi Maiga and Dr. Joyce King tell us about this in the books Balancing Written History with Oral Tradition and the book Black Education. And this is why Dr. Maiga says West Africans are not really West Africans. They're East Africans who traveled west. One more time, that may sound a little confusing. Let me say it again. Dr. Hasimi Maiga says West Africans are not really West Africans. They're really East Africans who traveled west. That is our connection to ancient Kemet and the Nile Valley empires, okay? And this is why we built a lot of the similar types of things in West Africa that we did in East Africa, so that you can see that we built the University of Jané, still standing. Okay, you can see the University of Sankore at Timbuktu, still standing in present day Mali. Did you, when I was growing up, Brother Joe, I don't know if this was the case for you, but when I was growing up, we had a saying, man, I'll knock you all the way to Timbuktu. I didn't know that was a real place, much less one of the great learning centers of the world, where people came from all over Africa, all over Asia, all over Europe to study at the feet of our ancestors. And when they did not refer to themselves as the N-word. And so Man, this is okay. We getting deep. So we're going from East Africa to West Africa, and we're seeing excellence all the way around, right? So when it gets real deep like this, for some reason, my PowerPoint begins to lock up because the spirit is moving so much. But we control technology. We're not going to let technology control us, right? So if you're learning something, if you like this information, and you think more people should know about this, just type "Amen" in the chat box. Let me see if I can get an amen for something that we've been talking about, because we've covered a lot of ground, and we have a little bit more to go. Thank you, Brother King, Brother Wayne, Brother Davis, Brother Mike, Brother Mackay. Okay, wonderful. So we got plenty of amens. I think that means that we need to go ahead and continue. All right. So let's pull it up and let's go to the next level here. All right. Now, did you know that there are over 100,000 manuscripts at Timbuktu alone that have yet to be translated?
Mm.
Over 100,000. This is why we got to raise up powerful scholars so they can translate, so we can see what our ancestors were trying to tell us. Manuscripts about spirituality, manuscripts about science and engineering and mathematics and all sorts of different things, right? Over 100,000 manuscripts at Timbuktu that have yet to be translated. Mathematics
These are some
and
of the mathematics and astronomy manuscripts.
yes, mathematics and astronomy manuscript here. Okay. Now, for those of you who wonder, man, how do we, this is so powerful. How do we get this to the youth? Well, I present to young people all over the country and even internationally. The presentation that you're receiving, I've done at colleges and universities as well. So everybody from pre-K to postdoctorate, I've done variations of this presentation, but we also have materials that will help you with this. One of them is called Reading Revolution. This is a book of 90 reading selections that are set up in a kind of a standardized testing format with a reading selection on the left and a 10 multiple choice questions on the right. There are over 90 of these selections. And we suggest that parents do one a day with their child, or teachers do one a day with their child. And the other thing is, not only do children love this, adults love it too, because we were so miseducated and didn't get this information ourselves. Okay. So now we've moved from ancient Kemet, we've looked a little bit at West Africa. Now we need to look at the majesty of the Moors and the African influence in early Europe. Now this is so important, especially for the times that we're living in, brothers and sisters, because the Moors ruled Spain for almost 800 years, from 711 AD to 1492. The Moors ruled Spain. And the reason that they ruled Spain and had an influence throughout all over Europe is because they had something like you're familiar with what an exchange student is. Well, in ancient times, it was not uncommon for the king or royalty to send one of their children to the court of another neighboring king to facilitate diplomatic relations, and for that child to be educated in the culture of the other group, so that they would better understand their neighbors. Okay. Well, what happened when the Moors sent one of theirs over to Spain? They sent one of the young ladies over, and she was raped by one of the members in the Spanish court. And they said, "Oh no, we're gonna take care of this. We're gonna settle this." And they ended up conquering that area and ruling for almost 800 years. Okay? And what's so important about that is several things. For one thing, I'm sure you've heard about the plague, the bubonic plague, the plagues that were running rampant throughout Europe during the Middle Ages. And one of the reasons that those plagues were running rampant is because what the Muslims discovered when they got over there is that people don't bathe. I'm not, this is not an insult. Please put yourself on mute, because some of you, we can hear you, and we want everybody to be able to hear the message. This is not an insult to Europeans. This is in the scientific research literature. Okay, so this is not Dr. Akua speaking. The scientific research literature documents the fact that the people in Europe were not bathing at that time. And so the plague was running rampant. I mean, millions of people dying. It was the Moors who brought over and lifted Europe out of the Dark Ages with their science and technology. And one of the first things that they taught people how to do was to bathe. We'll get into that in just a moment. But this is General Tyreek. His army landed on this rock right here, which today is called the Rock of Gibraltar. It's on the tip of southern Spain. But the Rock of Gibraltar is named after General Tyreek, Jebel Tyreek, General Tyreek, okay? And this is where they landed. So if you look at these are obviously aerial shots of the Rock of Gibraltar, but you've seen this rock many times before, whether you realize it or not. I used to see it all the time when I was growing up, as I'm sure many of you did, but this is the way that you saw it. When Prudential had those insurance commercials saying, get a piece of the rock. You see, you can show me almost anything and I can show you our impact and influence on it. This is a picture of me standing on top of one of the peaks of the Rock of Gibraltar. There are several peaks. This is one of them. You can see another one behind me. And then behind that, you can see Africa. It is very interesting. So here we see Moorish nobles playing chess. This is around 1200 AD. Okay, so a lot of people aren't aware that was a game that we established. And it's a game that we need to return to because it is a game that teaches cause and effect relationships. It teaches you a good chess player has to think 5, 6, 7 moves in advance. And another thing, a very important lesson for our brothers to learn, is that the most powerful piece on the playing board is not the king, but the queen. One more time, on a chessboard, the most powerful piece is not the king, but the queen. So, brother, who you choose to be your queen is so very important because she's the one that has the some aspects of mobility that you can't. You know, the queen can move in any direction and in several spaces, right? Arturo Alfonso Schomburg, also known as Arthur Schomburg, was a Puerto Rican African brother. And he said, African history is simply the missing pages of world history. That's all we're doing today is filling in the missing pages of world history. But before I continue, brothers and sisters, as a teacher, as a professor, I feel compelled to give you a test on what we've learned so far. Now, Brother Joe didn't know that when he invited me, I was going to give you all a test. Y'all didn't know that when you got on here, but I want to see what you know. I want to test your knowledge here. Not to worry though. This is only going to be a 30-second test, and I believe everybody will score 100% on it. We're going to help everybody to score 100%. But in order for us to do that, we have to learn to see with a different set of eyes. So here are the directions to the test. The directions say, how many circles do you see? Now, I'm not talking about the circle in the letter O here or O over here or there. I'm going to put a picture. I'm going to put an image on the screen. And when I do, I'm going to give you 30 seconds to type in the chat box and tell me how many circles you see. All right. Are you ready? If you're ready, here we go. Don't press send until the 30 seconds are up, until I tell you to press send. But you can type in the chat box how many circles you see, but don't press send yet until I ask you to, okay? Here we go. Ready, set. How many circles do you see? 30 seconds. 25 seconds. 15 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, press send and tell me how many circles do you see? All right, let's look at some of these answers coming in. Pull up the chat box here. I got answers ranging from 0 to 84. I see 20, 16, 0, 0, 12. And I'm sure I see somebody put 20. I'm sure somebody's, especially those that put a 0, you're like, what in the world are they looking at? Like, I don't see any circles, right? But here's the thing, brothers and sisters. Remember, we say sharpen your eye and tune your ears so you know what you see and understand what you hear. Sometimes in life, you got to look twice. Otherwise, you might miss something. So when you looked at that picture the first time, what you may not have been, when I first put it up there, the first thing that you saw was squares, right? But if you looked a little more carefully in between the squares, look at the vertical lines. And if you look carefully, you'll begin to see the circles emerge. And in fact, there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 circles. Now, if you didn't see the circles before, but you see the circles now, I want you to type a yes into the chat box. If you didn't see the circles before, but you see the circles now, I want you to type a yes into the chat box. Because remember, I said, we want to make sure everybody types yes. Okay. And so I see a lot of yeses coming through now. Great. So now, why did I share this with you? The reason that I shared this with you is for a very important reason. Okay. Here it is. Those circles. Hold on for a second. My PowerPoint's trying to lock up on me again, but this word will go forth today with power and conviction. So bear with me for just a moment. Here we go. All right. The reason that I asked you to put that in is because of this. Those circles that you didn't see at first represent the power, the potential, the possibilities, the excellence and achievement that is within each and every one of us and our children. But many of us have not been given the eyes to see that. We have been very skillfully miseducated and trained to see the negative, right? And so here's my observation. We were all looking at the same thing, but we didn't all see the same thing. The reason we didn't all see the same thing is because looking and seeing are two entirely different processes. There were many people who were looking at Christ, but they didn't see who Christ was and is. We have 3 eyes, 2 to look and 1 to see. Our ancestors referred to it as the third eye, the eye of all seeing enlightenment that allows us to see beyond the physical realm and into the mental and spiritual dimensions. This is why I said before, sharpen your eye and tune your ear so you know what you see and understand what you hear. Now, if you don't get that, let me give it to you in a biblical reference. This is why Yeshua, or Jesus, his original name in Hebrew was Yeshua, why he says the light of the body is in the eye. He doesn't say eyes, plural. He says eye. The light of the body is in the eye. If therefore your eye is single, meaning your eye is focused on righteous and heavenly things, then your whole body shall be full of light. Okay? Now, brothers and sisters, as I begin to close, what we're going to do, we've gone from East Africa to West Africa. We've gone with the Moors into Europe and lifted Europe out of the Dark Ages. And now we're going to come to the Americas thousands of years before Columbus even knew the world was round, and you will see the African presence. These Olmec stone heads were found in Mexico, and they were dated at 3,000 years old. Take a look at the nose. Take a look at the lips. That's us, y'all. Dr. Ivan Van Sertima has documented this very thoroughly in his book, They Came Before Columbus, the African Presence in Early America, in Ancient America. In addition to that, you can see, once again, this statue. And please mute yourself if you haven't done so already. I'm hearing some background noise. Please mute yourself.
1, 2, 3.
Let me see if I can find who that is, because we don't want anybody to miss any of this. Make sure that you mute yourself, please. Make sure that you mute yourself. Also, you should know that when Ivan Van Sertima did his research, the helmet that is on this statue is known to be a helmet that was worn in the Kemetic military. Here's another one. Okay. All right. Come out here, see if we can mute whoever is not muted here. My apologies for the delay here. There we go. We found it. All right. Let me go back to my PowerPoint here because we don't want you all to miss one piece of this. It's just that important. Oh, there we go. All right. In addition to Ivan van Sertima, Alexander von Wuthenau was a German scholar who wrote a book called Unexpected Faces in Ancient America. So there are a variety of scholars who have written about these things. It's just that their scholarship has been intentionally hidden from us. This is one of my videographers before my son started doing videography for me. This brother right here used to do videography for me. He's 6 feet tall and he's standing in front of this megalith stone head. So they're 8 feet tall altogether. He's 6 feet, just to give you an idea of how massive these are. Okay. And so not only that, but when we look at the step pyramid of ancient Kemet in comparison, did you know that there are pyramids in Mexico as well that have the same dimensions as the pyramids in Kemet? Here are a couple of other pictures that will show you. So you see one of the pyramids in Mexico with the pyramid in Kemet superimposed over it, showing you that it has the exact same measurements at the base. Here's the difference though. Here's the difference between when Africans came to the Americas and when Europeans came to the Americas. When Africans came to the Americas thousands of years ago, they engaged in cultural exchange rather than cultural extermination with the indigenous population. One more time, we came in peace with cultural exchange rather than cultural extermination by wiping out the indigenous population. And so Dr. David Imhotep tells us in his book, The First Americans Were Africans. He tells us that the oldest skeletal remains found in the Americas are of blacks. Long ago, the youthful America was a Negro continent. Please mute yourself if you're not already muted. Okay, I just muted that. We want to make sure that everybody can hear this. So I simply asked a question or echo the question asked by one of my professors, Dr. Joyce King. Whose knowledge is worth knowing? Whose knowledge is worth knowing? And when we learn this knowledge, it's not just knowledge for knowledge's sake, it's knowledge for human's sake to meet needs and solve human problems. Just like I said earlier, one of the reasons we need to study the Moors is because of their scientific excellence and the fact that they were able to lift Europe out of the Dark Ages in the midst of a pandemic, because they showed them how to bathe. In addition to that, if we would look at the first successful open heart surgery in the world, happened in America, and it was done by a black man named Dr. Daniel Hale Williams. It wasn't that others could not perform the surgery, they just couldn't do it successfully. The patient would always die. Do you know why the patient would always die? Because the surgeons didn't wash their hands. Dr. Daniel Hale Williams said, hey, y'all, you got to wash your hands. And so this knowledge that helped to lift Europe out of the Dark Ages and in the midst of a pandemic back then, what else do we not know about the contributions of our ancestors, whether it was the Moors, whether it was the ancient Kemites, whether it was those in the ancient empires of Ghana, Mali, and Songhai? There's so much knowledge that our ancestors have. So we're not just studying this just to feel good. Feeling good is a natural byproduct of studying Black history, but it's more than that. If it was just about feeling good, then we just gonna die feeling good, as Amos Wilson said. No, it's about meeting needs and solving problems and understanding the role that history plays in civilized people. Brothers and sisters, as I begin to close, I want to remind you that Black people led the world in scientific innovation, literary production, and wealth creation. I have intentionally taught you a history that occurred prior to European invasion and intervention. How did powerful and proud Africans go from this to this? And then, how did we go from this to this? There's been some social engineering going on. And we as believers, we as people of faith, we should be leading the way in meeting needs and solving problems in our communities. See, we think ministry is preaching at people, and certainly there's a need for great teaching, right? But if you really want to reach the people, meet needs and solve problems, and they will come running and asking, what must I do to be saved? When they see you living a blessed life and meeting needs and solving problems, they will find their way to the church house. Now, if you're wondering the significance of history, because some people say, oh, that's good and everything, but hey, I'm trying to feed these kids. I'm trying to pay this car note. I'm trying to pay the rent, pay the mortgage. And people get kind of cynical and sarcastic about this information. And Dr. Amos Wilson tells us the only people who really don't know the significance of history would be our people when they ask questions like that. Powerful people know the role that history plays. But if you're not clear on it, Amos Wilson makes it crystal clear. He says, if there were not a direct relationship between history and money, history and power, history and rulership, history and domination, then why is it that the European rewrote history? Man, one more time, everybody. If there were not a direct relationship between history and money, history and power, history and rulership, history and domination, then why is it that the European rewrote history and rewrote you and me out of history? Brothers and sisters, let me leave you with these final words. Please remember the powerful words of Fannie Lou Hamer. This sister was the founder of the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, one of our great civil rights warriors who fought not only for the right for us to be able to vote in. If you didn't understand how important that was before, I can only hope that you understand how important it is now after this election. And I'm here in Georgia, where we just had a major Senate runoff race. But she said, never forget where we came from. Always praise the bridges that carried you over. And when we do this, we'll understand why James Baldwin said our crowns have been bought and paid for. All we have to do is put them on our heads. Why? Because we're royalty. And finally, beloved, I wish above all things that you would prosper and be in good health, even as your soul prospers. Peace and blessings. Brother Joe, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Wow, Dr. Chike, Akua, that was great. That was beautiful. Thank you so much for that presentation. I really appreciate that.